you to kind of open up discussion regarding the public budget forum tonight. As you're aware, we have time allotted from now till about 6:30 until our regular board meeting takes place. And we're going to just cover a few of the highlights and then open up to those folks that are here tonight with us to ask questions that they may have in regards to the budget. Obviously, we'll have other sessions moving forward as we present the budget further to the board and within the community. We open up different ways through thought exchange, chat roll that we've done in the past where folks can ask more questions as the budget process goes on. So tonight, obviously, March 1st is our first crack at the budget for this for next school year. So I'm just quickly going to go over kind of our goals and objectives when we're building the budget in that process. So when we look at the budget, our goals and objectives are fairly straightforward. The first one, obviously, we want to maintain and add high quality programs and services for students. The second one is we're constantly looking at controlling and reducing costs wherever possible. I think you'll see that in this budget quite a bit. 79% of the lines remain flat in our budget this year. So we'll talk a little bit about that. A goal of ours is to stay within the tax levy limit of New York's property tax cap, and we've done that for several years now. The fourth one is finding balance with the school district needs and what the school community values. Fifth would be forward thinking into the future budgeting challenges from a short-term and a long-term perspective. And we've seen some presentations in the past with CBO, with Kathy Blackman, some long-range projections, which can be difficult. I think we're in a prime example of that right now with the pandemic, of something that we never expected. But we work with them closely on short and long-term goals, and obviously those are shared, throughout meetings throughout the year with the school board as well. So, and last but not least, manage the district resources effectively in order to support educational program excellence, and that's really across the board. Obviously, student achievement is always our number one priority, but our goal is really to manage the resources and allocate the resources where we need them in order to be successful. So we're just going to go over some highlights, and Mr. Farrell can jump in as needed. I'll just touch on a little bit. So this year's budget, and you're going to see a more in-depth budget presentation at the 6:30 regular meeting, where we'll dig into some different graphs and slides and look at line item to line item as we move forward in the process. So this year's budget to budget increase is a 1.34%. That is really in range with where we've been the last several years. We typically remain in this ballpark of below 2% in the budget to budget increase. Our allowable tax levy this year is 1.41%. So the allowable growth factor is what drives the allowable tax levy increase, along with several other pieces such as pilots and in your overall budget as well, and which creates your levy amount. So we are 1.41%. In the last 6 out of 8 years, just for clarity, the allowable growth factor has been 1.23%. It's been below 2%, and this year it's 1.23%. So 6 out of the 8 years, we've never exceeded the 2% allowable growth factor, which is built in all around this whole tax cap process. We have no reserves in this budget again, as just like we did last year. As you'll see in the presentation later on in a little bit more detail, there's continued declining revenue for the school district. And one of the things that we want to hit on tonight is focusing on avoiding this repeat of history. And I know many of you are well aware of this. And if you were around in the 2009, 2010 era when the Great Recession hit, and this term called GEA, or Gap Elimination Adjustment, came into play. And it's something we've been talking about now for quite some time, and what a stimulus package actually does to your overall budget after a couple of years. And so we're going to look at a little bit more in depth to what that process looks like. And it really comes down to as simple as it's money in and it's money out. And what we've really got to keep our eye on is the declining revenue in all the other areas throughout the process from the state. So we feel like we're in a pretty good position. I think you'll see that that later tonight as we move forward. So some of the things in the governor's proposal, again, this year, he's trying to lump all the service aids together. I believe there's 10 different aids that he would like to lump together. This is probably the lowest aid year on the books for most school districts across the state. So of course he would love to make that the service aid amount and work off from there, because obviously that would benefit everybody except school districts. Transportation aid, we still have a lot of questions as far as we've been transporting food and devices and materials to students for about a year now. And while we've received some of the aid moving forward, there's still some questions into this school year that we need to answer. So there could be some adjustments to what our transportation aid looks like moving forward. And a real important thing for us to note tonight as we start to open up discussion is health insurance. And you know, we recently with the board approval have left the health insurance consortium, the BT consortium. One of the things that we've been obviously planning and looking at closely is that health insurance assumes about 70% of the increase in our budget. And that's pretty consistent from over the last few years when you're looking at the increases overall in our budget with health insurance. So we are changing models. We're going to a different group. We're looking at more of a self-funded approach where we feel like we're going to have a lot better control and flexibility moving forward with the programs we can offer. So that's really it. I mean, in a quick condensed version, so we can open it up for questions to those. I believe we had 3 or 4 people register for questions ahead of time. Sean, are you going to?
Yep, Mr. McNamee is unmuted, so he can speak.
Okay,
now.
Thank you. Hi, Haig.
I think he just has to unmute.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yep. Thank you.
Good evening. I did send a list of some questions. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to look at them or not. I did that to give it a little advance notice. If not, I'll just ask and look forward to seeing development of some of the points you made about future long-term and short-term planning. And I'll just start with this year, this coming fiscal year is the end of the teacher's contract. And so in fiscal year 2023, a new one will need to be in place. The right up front, you're identifying healthcare as the biggest contract cost driver that we have. Now, I've pointed out some things previously about what open box thinking might be able to do. Do you plan to do anything in this year, this coming fiscal year, regarding the compensation that our contracts have, because they are the highest cost in the southern tier, as illustrated also by the 70% health insurance increase? What plans exist for that? And then I'll just add a second question before I turn it over. There is, at this point in time, a plethora of cost data available from New York State Education Department, NYSBA, Seneca Bosse's Office of the Controller, regarding costs. Has anyone looked at that material in the process thus far?
I can answer that question, Haig. We're constantly looking at that information and doing comparisons along the way. This is part of the process for us as we're developing budget and rolling budget out. Certainly, we're well aware that contracts are coming up, and certainly, as you're well aware that there's a negotiation that takes place during that process. And one of the things that you'll hear later on quite a bit, and I can talk a little bit to it now, but we've spent ample time preparing ourselves this school year specifically to putting ourselves in a much better position financially as we begin to take on these next few difficult years. So certainly the bargaining units, we've had conversations. They've been very supportive in terms of wanting to be part of the solution as we move forward, knowing that we've got some challenging times ahead. Obviously, you're well aware that those things are confidential, but there's certainly things that we look at all the way across the board in terms of when we move forward as a school district financially and how contracts can play into that.
Okay. Thank you. I will point out, and I got the BOCES salary data from when you negotiated the last contract and their most current set. And if one looks at it on the face of it, you can see why the salaries remain the highest in the southern tier. It's like a red flag on the center of the page saying, here it is, here's why our salaries are maintaining such an excess over the prevailing norms.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I mean, we're well aware of those documents and certainly pay close attention to those.
Let me turn the floor over to someone else.
Okay, thank you. Do we have others that have questions, Shauna?
There is no one else on as an attendee.
Hey, do you have more questions?
You should just be able to unmute now. I'll put you back to talking.
Okay.
All right.
Pardon me. If I understand Ms. Blackman's presentation of last, she represented that the school has had an underrun of about $4.67 million.
That's correct.
All right, well then, thank you. Then the question becomes, and this is huge. It's like as big as the reserves were 10 years ago, or 10 years ago, as a relative percent in terms of the budget. So if there's this huge amount of money and the reserves that we have now are adequate, why shouldn't we get a tax refund rather than a tax increase?
I can explain that to you, Haig. I don't know if you had received the recent email that I had sent you regarding that, but
yes, I did. Thank you.
Over half of those funds are allocated. We have left the workers' comp consortium and are in the process of leaving the health consortium, and we were owed significant funds in leaving those. So strategically, as I had mentioned earlier in the forum, we are moving to a self-funded program, which we believe long-term will save the district and the taxpayers a significant amount of money. But one of the things in that process that needs to happen when you go self-funded is you need to develop your own insurance reserve to cover any large claims that may come into play. So the plan really is that those funds are going to already be allocated to help support this transition or change to a new healthcare option for the school district, and that helps set us up for the future in terms of what we can offer and the flexibility within what we can offer. So we expect to see some savings certainly down the road from that, but we've got to prepare for what could be some bad claims and things of that nature. The other thing I think to keep in mind, we've spent obviously ample time really doing some things differently this year. The pandemic has driven a lot of those decisions, has changed some of the structure of the spending. We've had a significant number of students who chose not to attend BOCES programs, which is a huge reduction in cost for the district. In terms of, we had some layoffs earlier in the year in the process with some of our one-to-one aides of students who chose to stay home. But ultimately, I think when you look at the historical slides that we're going to share later in the presentation at the board meeting, I go back to that comment about the gap elimination adjustment, and that being upwards of about $2 million a year that hit the school district. So I think considering what we're dealing with this pandemic, the financial shortfalls of New York State, that it behooves us to be fiscally responsible to put that money away and for the time being for some rainy days ahead, because we know the next 3 to 5 years are going to be challenging. So as you'll see in those slides as well, we'll talk a lot about when stimulus funds come in and then when stimulus funds leave, and that huge gap in revenue that happens. So that's really the plan at this point. I hope that explains. I certainly understand what you're saying, but I hope the explanation explains of where we're at financially and what we're looking at in the future moving forward.
Thank you. That helps. I'll just have to, it's difficult for me. Okay, then let me, I'll just, for this spirit of thinking, when we were doing the last contract iteration, I brought to the attention a number of things in the contract that were deserved attention. One of them, for instance, was the dispute resolution provision. Mm-hmm. And the dispute resolution circumstance or provision is something that you might be called to use once in 100 years.
Right.
The last time the Spanish flu hit was a little more than 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. The school, unlike every other school district contract I have read, we are the only school district that carries the risk of basically unbounded litigation costs in the event it goes to binding arbitration. So the point is that if we see something like COVID, the question then becomes, why are we the only school district, perhaps in New York, that has this risk in the contract? It could mean keeping a union person in the school who you wouldn't want around your children, or paying $1 million. And all that has to be done is someone asks, well, can we make this like every other contract in the state of New York? That's how much effort it would take. Then the other thing.
Yeah, I think I have that in my notes, Hag, from the last conversation that we had regarding that. So it's certainly something we'll take a look at. I haven't had a chance to read every contract across New York State, so I couldn't tell you whether certainly make a good point as something for us to take a look at.
And then I'll just say, you know, I asked about, in a prior board meeting, I asked about this district bringing the compensation in line with prevailing norms. And I was told that that was happening because they were, the contract had brought the entry-level salary to a 2% increase per year rather than the 3% that is in the current contract, for the 3% for everyone who isn't entry level. Well, I did the calculation on that with some appropriate assumptions, and such a thing does absolutely nothing to put any control on the salaries. And I just don't understand why that was in the contract, because I'll just stop. It doesn't look good. Because did anyone think that one through when they made that change there? And I'll just leave it as that. And I will say, NISBA gives, they're late, but they have good information available for metrics on contracts. And I have been told that the school district has never used it. And I will further say that I have tried to get information from NISBA for you, and they won't answer my questions. So yeah, this is for the children. And I'm just going to stop because I'm getting on my soapbox.
Okay. I think, hey, you know, when you look across the board, obviously everything we do is for kids, and our focus is there. I know that these are ongoing issues for you that we've talked about, you know, for quite a few years. And I think there's some discrepancies in thought process around that, which is fine. But at the end of the day, I do believe that we're a school district that is heavily focused on what's best for kids. And that's something I wake up every day. And I know the rest of the folks on the board and administration and our teaching staff, you know, that's their number one priority, is to do what's best for kids. And I can't think of a better representation than what I've seen the last 12 months as we've tackled this pandemic. And our staff have just done an incredible job of anywhere from dropping off supplies to homes within the community, to delivering food, to engaging and connecting and building relationships, which are all crucial for the health and well-being of our kids in the community. So I'm really proud of our staff and the work that they've done. Certainly, you know, obviously your points, we take them into consideration. You know that my door is always open, or my phone's always available, or email if you have questions. I'm always willing to talk about those things. Yeah. But I think really at the end of the day, ultimately, it's about kids and giving them the best opportunity.
And I think what you have done in 3 years, with you and your staff have done in 3 years with academic achievement, it's hard to compliment you enough on taking us from mediocre to above average. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. Do we have any other questions, Shona?
No other questions.
Okay. I guess we will make transition here. We're using the same forum, correct, for the board meeting?
Yes. And I think what we'll do is I will make the board members co-hosts so they can also turn their cameras on.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
I'll do that right now. And then Marcy just needs a minute to set up her screen. And then we'll be ready to go. You can start whenever.
If you unshare, Corey, I can share.
Gotcha. I was just going to try to do that.
Thank you.
If I can figure it out. boy, here we go. All right, you should be good.
Here we go. Bob? I don't have his presentation, Corey. I assume he's going to take a.
So
I
I
have
don't
it
know.
on,
You
I
got it, right,
can pull
Corey?
it up. Yeah, I
Okay.
have it. I can pull it
Okay.
up.
All right.
How do you get to be co-host?
I'm working down the list. You'll see a pop up that says that I
Got
just
it.
made you a co-host, and then you should be able to turn your camera on.
Got it. Okay.
Sorry about this setting. This was my
Right
fault.
now, I'm just the Pillsbury dough girl.
Let me know. Let me know if you can't turn your cameras on once I make you co-host.
I see Kathy. A real person.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, so I've
There
got.
we go. Everybody's popping up.
Oh, I made
There we are.
I made
Okay.
Mr. Francisco a co-host. I think
Okay.
I must have misclicked. Did I get everybody?
There.
Let's.
Yep.
Okay, I think we're good. Oh, there's Sue.
I think whenever you're ready, Mr. Civic, if we're
Okay.
I think we're right at 6:30, so
Right. Okay. Well, I need a motion to call the meeting. Well, let's call the meeting to order. I need a motion to adopt the agenda this evening.
So moved.
Linda? Dan or Jason? All in favor?
Aye.
That's carried. The hearing of the public, Corey, we're going to handle as normal.
yes. She may be able to use it right within this if someone raises their hand, right, Shauna?
Yes. Yep. If anyone who is a participant would like to say something, they can raise their hand, and then I'll unmute them.
All right, well, just stop. Shauna, if you need to. But assuming we don't have any hands?
Yeah.
Oh, no hands right now.
All right. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
So moved.
Linda,
Second.
is that Kath?
Yep.
Any questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's carried. Okay, moving on to the personnel section of the consent agenda. I need a motion, please.
So moved.
Jason? Mike?
Yep.
Okay, any questions regarding the personnel portion of the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. Moving on to the remainder of the agenda, I need a motion, please.
So moved.
Linda?
Second.
Danny? Okay, there's 5 items. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried as well. Okay, I do not have a president's report, so I will turn it over to you, Corey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Civic. So tonight we're really just going to move right into the full budget presentation. Obviously, you just had a quick view of what that looks like, but we'll go into much greater detail. Mr. Farrell will do the lion's share of the presentation tonight. He's done an incredible job putting all this work together, and the planning that goes on behind the scenes with several different folks. There's a lot of time that goes into this. So I'm going to give him the opportunity to talk about budget and At the end, I'll kind of come in and talk a little bit about our vision and alignment of where we're headed as a school district and how that jives with the budget. So, Mr. Farrell, I'm going to find your presentation, hopefully here in 1 second. Okay, everybody see that?
Yep.
All right. So you want to go into present mode? Or you're going to leave it like that?
I will
You
go.
can leave it like that. That's fine.
Sure.
So here we are again, that time of year, budget season. So this year is, I guess the theme of this year is to think not so much short term, but think long term. And you're going to hear a lot of that theme throughout the conversation. And we'll be talking a lot about revenue and state aid and its relationship to our budget and how our budget is financed in terms of revenue. So it's important that we pay attention to the long range planning that's going to be part of this. Yes, this is 1 year of budget, but what we do now will affect next year and the year after, and it's important to know where things are going. And we'll keep going through that as we go through the presentation. So goals and objectives of the budget. We want to maintain and add high quality programs. It's always important to us. We want to control and reduce costs whenever possible. So this is a budget where roughly 80% of all the lines in the budget are either left flat or decreased in the budget. That's the highest I've seen it in many years. So we pretty much in general have a flat budget this year. And you'll see that in the numbers. We're going to stay within the tax levy limit, which we've done consistently through the years. We want to find balance between the needs of the school district and what the community values. And then, of course, the trick is always to continue to be progressive and forward thinking with our budget challenges in a short and long-term way. We want to manage the district's resources effectively and support our educational programs. So this is a budget in which I think we do that. You will see that we continue our progressive nature as a school district. We continue to try to maintain our quality programs. And you'll see things like class sizes are still, maintained. Those are important things to us as we budget. So you'll see that throughout it. This is the budget at a glance. So we're going in right now with a budget gap. And it might look like a sizable one, but don't get too concerned with that. I'll explain as we go. Right now, our revenue is at 47,709,931. It is a decrease by 0.02%, just the smallest of pennies of a decrease. But the big thing is to remember here is the declining revenue issues we're going to have. And it's continuing from, the last few years, and it will continue on over the next couple of years. That is really our biggest challenge moving forward. The budget increases overall 1.34% to 48,356,690. You can see that our biggest revenue decrease is in state aid, a 1.5% decrease there. And our property tax levy is going up 1.4%, and that is the levy limit that we're allowed to. There is zero use of reserve funds or fund balance to balance this budget at this point. We have a gap of 646,759 to deal with. Go to the next slide. So this is our projected revenue. You can see there the tax levy of 1.4% yields us about $250,000 increase. Other revenues up 1.84%, which is about $90,000. And then there's the big decrease there in state aid. It's about a $350,000 decrease that we project for next year in state aid, and an overall decrease of about $8,000. And the tax levy increase again, or the tax cap being at 1.4%. So this is the important slide to pay attention to when it comes to revenue. The line I want you to look at is this local district funding adjustment and the federal stimulus lines, the second and third lines. Now, in the years past, you remember the GEA or the gap elimination adjustment. This is really that in the second coming. It's the same thing. What has happened here is between the the HEROES Act, which was the most recent stimulus funds Congress has given out to schools, has been given to states. And what the states basically did is said, okay, here's the money, but we're going to take it away at the same time. So they balanced their own gap by doing this. Overall, you can see that this eventually yields a $350,000 decrease in foundation or state aid. The biggest decrease that you're going to see has to do with the high cost aid. The state has not been willing to fund all of the high cost aid pieces back from the earlier part of the pandemic. There was an issue around one-to-one aids for particular special education students. And the state argued basically that, well, that since the aid was not in person with that student in school, they could not fund it. So that's why you're seeing that decrease in high cost aid. And that's about $157,000 and $23,000 decrease in state aid, which is the substantial part of that $350,000 decrease in state aid. All the other numbers, the other one to pay attention to is also transportation. Same scenario. The state would not aid us on certain transportation runs, specifically ones where we were delivering materials to kids and not necessarily transporting children during the pandemic. And therefore you see that decrease in aid. Overall, this is where we see things going in the coming budget when it comes to state aid. Go to the next slide. This is our miscellaneous local sources of revenue. The big piece here is our pilots. That is up about $89,000, which is the majority of that increase. The biggest pilot being obviously the Central New York Oil and Gas pilot is the biggest part of that. And then there's just little changes here and there throughout the revenue sources that eventually adds up to about a $90,000 increase and a 1.84% increase in miscellaneous sources. Go to the next slide.
Bob, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Can I interrupt real quick?
You can.
Is there any progress made at the state level about addressing pilots in the equation? I know that they've tried. I just don't know if there's been any success.
We're actually learning some new information about that. And the most recent thing we've learned from NISCUS is that you can, as a school district, put in a resolution to an actual bill to the Senate and to the Assembly. And Corey, you and I were working on this together with a school district up in the Albany area that had done this, where they had put an amendment to the actual law for their own particular school district to spread out the pilot payments over years, so that then inside the calculation. Corey, have you heard anything on the legislation side as an overall? I don't think they're doing anything overall though, right?
I haven't heard anything more. There was initially some conversation around them looking at putting a 3-year rollout of that process with the pilot, so you'd be able to scale it out 3 years. But I haven't heard that's received much traction at this point. So I think we're
looking at
we're in
this other
right now.
avenue, right? is where where you can put in legislation on your own for your own particular school district, but I don't know if that's going to get a lot of traction. So, and the idea there is it's not a perfect system. They want you to set aside a reserve fund in order to compensate over the years for the lost revenue that might happen.
Yeah.
It's not the best solution. It's just one that we're now becoming aware of that's been used up in the North Country area, up in the Albany area. But that's all we know at this point with that. And we're going to talk about the tax cap in a minute and some of the issues that it raises with the growth factor.
Thank you. Sorry.
No worries. Ask any questions, please ask. So here is the overall revenue picture as far as property taxes. The appropriated fund balance, we will stabilize this year at 1.6. And again, no use of appropriated reserves this year. And then property taxes, a 1.4% increase with an overall decrease in revenue of $8,000. Go to the next slide. So again, just to repeat, 1.4% increase in property tax levy. Again, no use of reserves. The big thing to remember here is state aid is not finalized yet. Remember, this is just based off of the governor's proposal, the executive branch's proposal. And now the Assembly and the Senate will develop their budgets and work with the governor to eventually get a final budget passed, hopefully by April 1st, where we can then set our final budget and adopt our budget in April. So that's an important bullet to remember, that it is not final. It's based off of the current governor's proposal. Next slide. So now we're back at that gap, right? That $646,000 gap we have between revenue and expenses. So what do we do with that? We really have some options, and here's what they are. We've been through this exercise before, but there's a new option this year that was not available to us in the past. So one option is to do what's called a carry forward of the Federal CARES Act funds, which is about $436,869. Now, the CARES Act was the very first stimulus package that Congress passed for COVID relief. And it had this amount of money allocated for our school district in it. And it was for this year. Now, the way that law is written is that you can expend those monies over a 2-year period. So you do not have to expend them all the way until September of 22. So what we can do is we can, instead of using the $436,000 this year, the federal money this year, we use current fund balance to pay what was allocated for those funds, and then carry forward this money, and then therefore close that $646,000 gap by that amount. All right, that's one option. The other option is you reduce additional positions through attrition. So anybody retired, you eliminate those positions. That's an issue in terms of program services or programs and class sizes and such. You can reduce additional positions through layoffs, whatever that amount might be. That's an option. We can use the ERS reserve and appropriate that reserve moving forward as some sort of number there to also close the gap. And then the other thing I'll remind the board is that the state legislature has not finished their budget side yet, and therefore there could be an increase in foundation aid that could further close that gap for us. So we don't know that as of yet what that gap might be. Those are the options that we're going to have over the next month or so. Next slide here is the expenses. So this is a summary of expenses. The biggest thing here is that when you look at the total expense, I just got to move this out of my way here. The total expense or increase, the $638,000 there at the bottom, $467,000 of that increase is really benefits or health insurance. That's the large increase. The contractual expense increase you're seeing has to do with high cost students that are in residential placements for tuition. That's a large increase year over year. But the other big one really is the health insurance side. It accounts for 70% of that total increase in expenses from year to year. And it has been consistent year to year. Go to the next slide. So this is the budget broken down by function. You can look at all the function areas and see the increase and decreases. You can see a lot of the lines really just remain flat, or you see a decrease. In general, you're going to see mostly the dashes in the budget change, which means that there was no change, or you'll see a decrease. Next slide. This again, this is the 2110 through 2855. This is most of your instructional area. This is the real meat of the budget, the highest costs in the budget, where you can see that teaching 2110 and 2250 are your largest portions of the budget. This is the salaries that are paid to teachers, instructional aides, special education. And then the final part here, this is mostly your benefits and your financing area and operations side of the budget. Again, I'll point to that $472,000 increase in hospital, medical, and dental as being a significant factor moving forward. Next slide. Okay, so tax cap levy calculation. So this is the calculation that the state requires us to do for our tax levy or tax cap. The number I really want you to pay attention to here is this allowable growth factor. And you can see it there in the middle at 1.23%. That is typically built upon the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index, or inflation. That number really hasn't been anywhere above 2%. It can't go above 2% because that's what they mean by the 2% cap. It's not 2% cap on taxes overall. It's a 2% cap on that allowable growth factor right inside the calculation itself. This year, it's down pretty low. It's 1.23%, which inflation really hasn't been all that high, and that's why that number is what it is. And that's really the driver of why our tax cap remains at a lower portion of 1.4. This is the calculation they've been using now for well over a decade. Again, the pilot piece in here is that pilot receivable number there in the middle. You can see in the 21-22 pilots receivable of $4 million. That's what Mrs. Rollison was indicating earlier about our coming years, where some of the pilots are going to be falling off pilots and into the tax rolls, and where it becomes problematic is right there in that line. And that's what can drive your tax cap number up a lot higher than 2%. We believe with the recent work that we're doing with the IDA and Central New York Oil and Gas, we should be able to alleviate that over the next 5 years. But we will have issues of other properties coming off pilots into the tax rolls in the coming years. This year is not really a problem, as you can see in the 1.4% increase. Now, this is a chart I think is important to pay attention to. You've seen it before in past presentations. This is the new landscape of fiscal responsibility that we're really dealing with. It's dealing with what we dealt with the Great Recession in the past, tax caps, pilots, and now we're into pandemics. So you can see that our tax levy increases have been generally stable. And that's really the tax cap in effect. It has done what it's supposed to do in keeping taxes at a pretty minimal level. When we talk about declining revenue as being an issue for us, if the state isn't going to fund schools at its full value from a state aid perspective, and you are limited on your ability to increase taxes because of the tax cap, it's continually pressuring school districts with fiscally managing your expenses. So you're having to decrease the size of your school district, decrease your programs. And that's really the challenge moving forward. I put this slide up there because it's important to see what it used to be years ago in the TAN area. High tax increases to what it is now over the last, 12 years, roughly in the 1% range over that time frame. You go to the next slide. So this is our budget history over that 14 years. You can see that in general, we tend to stay, anywhere between 1% and 2%. You can see in the last few years, we've been right around 2%. Last year, we actually were a small decrease in our budget. And this year is again, another modest 1.34% increase in the budget. Now, I think this slide is probably what I would say one of the most important slides to pay attention to in the whole presentation, because we're in a place where we're getting stimulus funds from the federal government in the form of CARES and the HERO Act. And now there's this newest one coming through, which we'll see what happens with that. And if you look at the two highlighted areas, if you look in the past, in the 2010 timeframe, from the era stimulus state and local government funds, you can see that we got it in the year 2010, but then the two following years, it disappeared. And you can see that the budget had decreased almost $1 million. If you go up here to the time now, this year, you can see that next year it's projected that $1.7 million in stimulus funds that was in the first slide there for state aid is going to disappear. So we're going to have to compensate for that. It is expected that the budget will likely have to decrease next year because of it. And therefore, you're going to see our budgets have to stabilize right around this $48 million number. And that is a significant long-range challenge for us moving forward. Next slide. Again, the significant budget driver this year is health insurance, as it has been. It is 73% of the total increase in the budget. We put this slide in here to show the difference between what was the Broome-Tioga BOCES, Broome-Tioga Delaware Consortium for health insurance that we just recently decided to leave for next year to go into this Veritas buying group, which you can see the difference between those programs. Now, that ultimately does not solve the health insurance problem. It helps because it's likely to be less increases over time. The health insurance consortium increases were going to be anywhere from 10.5% to 12.5% increases year over year, completely unsustainable. They're now projected to be somewhere around 5.5% to 6.5% in this new buying group. It's better, but it's not great. So we have an issue that we're going to have to tackle when it comes to health insurance. It is the number one driver in our budget. And then when you take this in conjunction with what I showed you in the previous slide for what is about to happen with federal stimulus money, that is the long-term issue moving forward. Go to the next slide. So included in this budget is, again, a maintaining of current programs. The pandemic has forced us into smaller class sizes at the elementary level. And we're finding some decent success there with that. And we're not about to move away from it. And so this budget maintains that, and it's important to maintain that. You'll be hearing a lot in the future about how we intend to tackle some of our academic needs in terms of gaps in our students. And, what better way to do that than to have less kids in your room to have to be able to work with. And we're finding some real opportunities there. We continue our programs like the Building and Construction Systems program, our agriculture program. We'll continue with enrichment as we have in the past. Hopefully we can get back to some of that this summer. This budget also continues to implement career pathways and service learning opportunities. We need to get back to our co-ops and internship expansions. And then the other part is we are going to increase our opportunities for college credits. We see tremendous opportunity in our high school to allow kids to earn more college credits as they go through our high school. This budget also increases our CTE programs, our career and technical education programs, where we add in animal science and a heavy machinery and equipment repair and operation program, or it's also known as a HERO program. A lot of the federal money you're going to be hearing about moving forward outside of this next stimulus package, it's expected that Congress is going to eventually tackle infrastructure in this country. So with that being said, money is going to be, we believe, invested in infrastructure, which means there's going to be jobs available in this area. There already is a need in this area, and we only see it growing. So here's the budget timeline moving forward. This is the proposed budget right now. This is just the first draft. The board will need to adopt a final budget on April 19th. We will have 2 information sessions like we do every year, one at Apalachin on the 5th of May, and then the official one at the district office on May 10th. And then the annual budget vote this year will be on the 18th of May. So that concludes the presentation. Is there any questions?
Bob,
Corey, you want to add anything?
Bob, I have a question.
Sure.
Regarding the HEROES money, you've got the HEROES money and the CARES Act.
Yep.
First with the HEROES money,
yep.
As far as the way the state is handling that,
yep.
It doesn't sound like that was the intent from the federal government. Do you know if they're in compliance with what the federal government had expected those funds to be used for?
So I would agree with you on this. We did at the legislative breakfast this year have there was a lot of conversation around that with our local legislators. And I don't know if the Assembly and the Senate in New York plans to address that. I haven't heard any information further from that legislative breakfast. Corey, have you heard anything else on this?
I have not heard anything further regarding that, no.
So they were clearly aware of what you're talking about in terms of that it was not supposed to be allocated the way that it is allocated right now. But it's really, we're at the mercy of New York State's process here, and whatever the legislature decides in conjunction with the governor is what we are going to get. So you make a very good point. We believe that too, but we'll see how it turns out.
It just seems to fly in the face of, what the funds were, at least from the federal government level, what they were earmarked for, not for the state to balance their budget, but to help, help
correct.
School districts do the same thing. It just seems to me that it's just a total misuse of what the government expected those funds to be used for.
I would agree. It should have been like the CARES Act, because look at how now with the CARES Act allowing us to do. It's allowing us to help balance our budgets moving forward. It's allowing us to make some long range plans, but that's not the case. You're right, 100% right. That's not what's happening with these funds.
Well, I was sorry I had to miss the legislative breakfast. Did it sound like, Corey, you were there, Linda was there, that there was any hope that they might be able to impact Cuomo's decision to basically steal the money from the schools to balance his own budget?
I think that there'll be some pressure there for sure. The outcome of that, I'm not sure if we'll see anything different, but I do think that, some of the advocacy groups are pressuring around that area as well. And again, I think it's maybe a different interpretation of what the federal government expected those funds to be used for. So Not 100% sure. I think these are still a lot of unanswered questions, which is why I expect we probably won't see a finalized budget until as late as possible in this process. If that, it may even be one of the years where we don't get an on-time budget. I'm not sure. So anything.
It's been a long time, but it's not unprecedented, that's for sure.
Yeah, I guess at this point, the way the last year's gone, anything's possible.
Right.
So.
Well, and the CARES Act funds, Bob. So moving them forward into next year, so the year following that.
Yep.
Does that create a $400,000 hole in the following year?
It does. And I think our thinking on that, Gene, is that we can make the budgetary adjustments we need next year in order to compensate for that.
Okay.
I think
we can handle that.
Yeah. I think the other piece to consider in that is, that 1.7 million is going to come off.
Correct.
So this it kind of alleviates a little bit of that pain of the 1.7 for the time being. So we're kind of slowly working our way down to being able to manage when that entire number comes off. So I think we can do that over a couple of year period and be pretty successful.
My prediction, Gene, is that when you looked at Kathy's presentation, she did it basically where it's a 20% reduction in that actual stimulus amount over the next 5 years, which is similar to how gap elimination actually worked. I don't think it's going to be 20. I think it's going to be a little bit higher than that, actually. So I think we can.
Wow, I have no idea.
That
was interesting.
Some type of technical.
Somebody started a power saw in the middle of the presentation.
That was a fax machine. He may have lost power because Marcy had texted me during the meeting. She lost power at one point. So it might be going around.
Yeah.
So any other questions, Bob? Obviously, great job, putting this together. I think, just to sum up at the end, one of the things to keep in mind in all this is where we're headed programmatically, and going back to our initiatives over the past few years of where we're trying to keep kids engaged here in our community and put them in programs where they can be successful and have some opportunities within the community. As I said before, we're working with the chamber closely to look at some potential internships, and also aligning other students as things begin to open back up to get them out into the community and experiencing different things. So you're going to see, I think, in some of these adjustments, while we're it's kind of a moving target within the budget as we allocate funds towards different programs in order to grow those programs. As the board's aware, we also have a $200,000 workforce development grant that will go towards some of that work as well. So some of the staffing pieces, while it looks like we should be able to remain pretty flat in terms of staff, it may just look a little bit different in terms of allocation of where staff go. In looking at how we're trying to grow specific programs. So we feel like we have a lot to offer. We really have the right people in the right places. And, we're fortunate, I think, in some sense that financially we've been able to get a handle on what's gone on this year in order to put us in a pretty good spot. So overall, I think we feel pretty good moving forward, considering what this last year has brought us to this point. So any other final questions before we move on? Okay. So I think, did Marcy lose her? Did she lose us? Oh,
I'm back.
There she is. She's back.
I'm back.
Okay.
It was just a short power surge, I
Okay.
guess.
Okay, so I think at this point we have the public comment.
Yeah,
Do we have anything?
there's one question from email.
Okay.
I'll ask it from Robert Anders. The question is the state aid of 22,961,814 a guarantee or can it be less?
Well, yeah, I don't think there are any guarantees. It could be less. Probably not likely, considering it's the initial rollout of the executive proposal. What we typically see is the minimum usually comes out, and then we may see some adjustment in a more positive direction. But and again, this is a year of unprecedented year, and anything could happen. But so we don't know exactly at this point.
And one more question. Mr. McNamee has one question. I'm gonna let him ask it.
Sure.
Well, this is a comment, public comments. One, if I summarize what I've heard on budgeting this year or thus tonight, the word that I haven't heard describe it is multi-year planning. I'm hearing you say that that's what you have to do in order to meet the next few years. Okay, let's hope we see that in some numbers. B, I shared this with you all at a much earlier date, but I just using very simple metrics, the real wages of the working person have increased about 14% in the past 25 years. If you use the simplest of numbers, the teachers union contract, it has been 29%. And that, so it's double what the community tax base has enjoyed. So that's where all the money is. And any budget planning without dealing with that is just insincere. And so that needs to be put under control. Additionally, I have talked about the employee contribution requirement, I think it is, for the pension funds. Those things don't make sense in that in 2010 and 12, they put in tiers 5 and 6, and that should have turned the curve down or flat, but it's not happening. The point here being, what are the taxpayers doing continually paying a higher, on average, I gave the trend line, why are we always paying more? And this is it's difficult to answer, but at the top level, why are we always paying more in real dollars for the pension funds, and this never being evaluated in the compensation of the contract? So that's a question. Why are we taking on higher healthcare costs all the time, the highest salaries, and an unbelievable pension cost burden? Why are we doing that? Period. Or question mark.
I can answer the question in terms of the TRS. We don't control that. That's driven by TRS and the state as far as that goes. So we don't make that number. We don't include that increase. That number comes from the state, and it's obviously is driven by several factors. And I can't not agree with you. And in some sense, I guess know exactly what their process is of how they go with that. I think, sometimes it looks like the market's done really well and it should be driven somewhat off of the market. But then we'll see an increase come as well. So
What I'm saying is, yes, I understand that it's a unilateral thing that's put on the school district. What I'm saying is okay, yes, we have to do that, but if we see the contribution jump 50% 1 year to another, which it can do, salaries aren't nothing. There's no compensation on the whole compensation package. In other words, we still provide the 3% raise, and there's no risk on the other side of the contract. The taxpayer is always picking up the higher healthcare and pension costs, as well as supporting the highest salaries in the southern tier. So that's where the money is. And if it isn't addressed on a 5-year plan, it's just going to be the same old every year in the future. I've been watching this since 2011, and believe me, with that, there's a little bit of validity to what I said there.
Thank you.
Corey, I don't know if you saw that Gene
Okay.
lost his
Yeah.
power.
So,
I'm back.
okay.
I'm back, but I don't have any video, but that's okay. Do we have any other questions, Shauna, or comments?
No, nothing. And you should be able to turn your video back on now.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I don't think that our student rep is with us. Oh, we have some district business. I'm sorry. We have some bids to reject, Corey, if I read this correctly.
Yeah, so I'll just explain that quickly so everybody understands. When we initially bid, some of these bids for general construction came in out of line in terms of what the normal bidding has been regionally. What we've done actually is gone back and made some adjustments to what's in the bid proposal. So we will be going out to a rebid, but we needed to reject the initial bids in that process. So we'll be going out to rebid with some adjustments moving forward here. That is the last bid in this phase that we plan to start here in the next few months.
Okay. So we need a motion on this, Corey?
So moved.
Yep.
Okay, Linda's made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Kath, any questions? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. Okay, now moving on. Travis is not with us tonight as far as I can see.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Kath. Little humor doesn't hurt at all. So moving on to our administrators, I guess I'll start with Ken Francisco.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry,
It's
couldn't
okay.
get the buttons to work here. A couple things. Just wanted to thank everyone for coming out to the music chicken barbecue. They sold out. The food was excellent. Fire department did a great job along with Lindsay and Megan and the whole crew. Again, just a big shout out and thank you to everyone for attending. Sticking on the music theme, 15 of our 7th to 12th grade music students participated in the virtual all-county festival this weekend. Megan and also Lindsay are going to be presenting at the BOCE's 4th annual Fine Arts Day, which is another great accomplishment for those ladies. And they just wanted me to mention too, throughout the month of March, they're going to be live streaming music events on Instagram and Facebook pages. They've done some great stuff this year and continue to do some great stuff. And then lastly, both Emily, Diane, and myself, along with the other administrators, participated in a conference last week on RTI, response to intervention, and we have another session this week. I'm sure Mr. Giorgio will mention a little bit about it also, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Emily, do you have anything?
Nope, I'm all good.
Okay. Mr. Schofield.
Thank you. Yeah, echoing what Ken said, excited about what we're doing with Solution Tree and continuing that RTI process with the teachers we have involved. On another note, Tom and I are doing this. We started it this week. Tom can talk more about it as well, but we have Becky Bowers coming back. She's starting to work with our elementary levels now, working on some social emotional learning for our students. We're pretty excited about it. They started it this week.
Looks like that's it for Phil.
We lost Phil. Well, Phil, if you come back, we'll let you finish. Let's move on to Mr. Beatty.
Good evening, everybody. Last week we celebrated the 100th day of school. And right now we have
Talking about
You're all right, Tom. Keep going. He just got muted.
right now we have about 90% of our students back in school. We're very glad to have them back in school 5 days a week. And we are spending a lot of time with teachers working on ways to catch kids up and reduce any learning gaps that we see as a result of the pandemic. So we're doing a lot of good work with that RTI stuff and taking it day by day.
Thanks, Tom. I guess we better switch back to Mr. Schofield again. Kathy's having a good time.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, well, we can hear
Okay.
you.
Sorry,
All right.
just excuse me.
Yeah, thank you. Again, same thing. Back to what Tom was talking about, say RTI, we're doing it, and we're excited about social emotional learning for our students. I think it's going to be a great program moving forward. We're starting this week. They're with us on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and I think they're going to be over AES by the end of the week on Thursday and Friday. So we're excited to
There he goes again.
Yeah, I think with the weather outside,
Yeah,
everybody's dealing with
yeah.
multiple issues.
Yeah.
So
It's going to be an
Well,
issue.
that and go into April.
There we go.
if you want, Mr. Civic, I can share updates from the principals later, just so we don't have any more
Okay,
issues the rest of the way.
all right. Well, I
I
don't
can
know.
send those out.
All right, that's fine. Well, unless anybody has any pressing things they need to share tonight, we'll move on then. Because it is, my power has gone out 3 times already today, so I don't know. So I guess all we have left to do is motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Wow.
Second. Mike beat me.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed.
Thank you all.
Everybody have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you all.